It's time again for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show, in sticking with the Star Trek CCG, I want to talk about strategy for a often underused affiliation in this game, and that is the Hirogen. Because in building another Hirogen deck, I've come up with some interesting things. When the Hirogen were added to the Star Trek CCG as a playable affiliation in the expansion known as the Borg, I, like a lot of other players, ignored them at first. Mainly because it was a Delta Quadrant thing, and I don't know, having the Kazon as a playable affiliation kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I never really experimented with the Vidians because Vidians. So the Hirogen were overlooked for a long time, and I've watched a lot of vids on them myself. I've talked to a lot of players about the Hirogen, and in the last few years I became more interested in them again. And in the last year, I've acquired a large amount of Hirogen and themed cards, and after putting together a deck and deconstructing it again, I've actually noted some interesting things that can help in strategy while using the Hirogen. Number one, unlike a lot of affiliations, because the Hirogen have a limited amount of personnel with massive attributes, you have to use a lot of the universal crew members in your deck. So for example, in my deck I have multiple copies of Ranjin, multiple copies of Jatarn, a couple of Konarek, and a couple other guys. I think I even have 2 of Devar, just because I need a varied skill set on each ship. Which brings me to the ships. This is a deck where I would actually start with 4 ships, and I would use 2 universal hunting vessels and 2 Venatic hunters. They come in handy. They're very interesting and powerful ships. They don't look like much, but the Venatic hunter itself, range 9, weapons 10, shields 12. That's pretty damn good. And the hunting vessel, which is considered a light cruiser, range 7, weapons X, shields 9. X equals 7 plus the number of your other staffed Hirogen ships here. So the more the merrier in this case, which is why I say a minimum of 4 ships. Their outposts are nothing special. They have a decent shield amount. You can build them anywhere, and I actually have a lot of these outposts. I will use 2 in the siege phase, and I'll put 2 in my draw deck to build later. Missions. This is where the Hirogen get a little interesting, because the first time I played a game with the deck, I noticed something, is that when I built the deck a second time, instead of having missions that have multi-affiliations, I actually stocked 3 or 4 of the secure station, not because it's universal, but because it is Hirogen-centric, and it's built wonderfully for the Hirogen affiliation. Alpha Hirogen plus total weapons is greater than opponent's total weapons here. Very interesting mission, and I've also included 2 or 3 of the any crew may attempt mission, answer distress signal, engineer plus officer plus medical, plus 10 points if a holographic personnel in crew. Now, that being said, the Hirogen have a lot of interesting holographic personnel. Some are dual affiliation, some aren't, but they come in very handy, which leads me to mention that you should have a couple holodeck doors, if not 3 in the deck, and many copies of holo projectors, which are the event card. This deck also works very well with a Q's Tent side deck, where you'd stock your power cards, which you'd also put a few in your draw deck, mix it up between your events and your interrupts. Keep a couple extra holographic and regular Hirogen personnel, as well as a couple artifacts, and maybe even a 3rd hunting vessel in there, to give you 5 ships in total. It can be a very powerful deck if you do it right, and it's not one that'll lag the game behind either. It's very interestingly set up. It almost makes me wish that I spent more time with the Hirogen when they first came out, because I might have developed an even more powerful deck by now. That being said, if you're looking to build a quality Delta Quadrant deck, ignore the Kazon, ignore the Vidians. Yes, you can have a pretty kick-ass Federation deck with Voyager and the bridge crew, but I believe, and And from playing it also in my solitaire game, the Hirogen hunting deck is actually pretty damn good to use, and it's more than a match for your Delta Quadrant Federation deck. Take that, Janeway!